this point, we're going to introduce Dr. Clemon Dabney III. His presentation is Making Your Own Cannabis-Based Medicine. Clemon Dabney III has a PhD from the University of Minnesota, where he studied cannabis molecular genetics and genomics. Clemon has a MS, a Master's of Science from the U of M, in plant breeding and molecular genetics. He currently works as the Chief Science Officer at Uniflora Holistics, and he's also the CEO of Dr. Dabs. Uniflora Holistics and Dr. Dabs are Minnesota-based hemp companies that specialize in manufacturing hemp-derived THC edibles. So this is a great friend of mine, so please give him a warm round of applause. He's one of one. Some of these people are one of one. Dr. Dabs, to the stage, please.
So, cannabis sativa is one of the first domesticated plant species that humans were to domesticate. The archaeological evidence dates back over 14,000 years. It was cultivated throughout ancient Europe, Greece, Rome, Africa, China, and Europe. In ancient China, so it's like the center of origin is really the steppe of Mongolia. So yeah, steppe of Mongolia. Quickly and rapidly moved throughout the world because people were like, hey, I can make clothes out of this, I can make food out of this, I can make medicine out of this, and I can get intoxicated from this. So it quickly moved throughout the world and has become culture basically in every continent outside of really Australia. But even Australia now has a pretty vibrant medical and recreational cannabis marketplace. So we're going to talk about, what is hemp? Because I make hemp-derived edibles, but what is hemp? So hemp is really largely a legal definition that is cannabis under 0.3% THC. So you can kind of think of hemp in three different product categories, I guess, or three different breeding lineages. You've got oilseed and grain. You've got fiber, and there's cultivars that are bred for their bast fiber, so that's kind of like the bark of the plant. Those are the long fibers that end up in clothing. And then there's the herd fiber, which is more of a woody fiber that ends up in papers and animal bedding. But now, more recently, it has been cultivated for its cannabinoids. So CBD, CBG, CBDV, CBC. And recently, is this working now? Yeah, there we go. All right. So more recently, it's been bred for high cannabinoid production. But when we look at some of these high cannabinoid cultivars, what we find is they're actually more genetically related to other THC-producing cultivars, and not so much fiber varieties or free-roll natural populations. So, industrial hemp, like we talked about, usually has less than 0.3% delta-9 THC, was selected for seed yield, fiber yield, and seed oil yield, and more recently been bred for high cannabinoid production. Drug cannabis, though, can contain greater than 30% THC or CBD, and so it has a tendency to look like this plant down there at the bottom, where the plant up top is like indicative of what a fiber hemp plantation would look like, or a fiber hemp farm would look like. So drug or medical cannabis has been largely bred for its cannabinoid and terpene content, and we'll talk about what terpenes are in a little bit. So there's kind of like two ways to think about these cannabinoids. There's non-intoxicating cannabinoids and intoxicating cannabinoids. So your major non-intoxicating cannabinoids are CBD, CBC, CBDV, and CBG. CBN in low doses is considered non-intoxicating, but at higher doses is considered intoxicating. So it's kind of like a jack of all trades, non-intoxicating versus intoxicating. We'll talk about the medicinal benefits of each of these later. So your intoxicating cannabinoids are, delta-8 THC, THCV, THCO, and delta-9 THC. There we go. And then we can kind of think about cannabinoids as major cannabinoids or minor cannabinoids. And this terminology is more like, does the plant produce them in large amounts or small amounts? So traditionally, cannabis made CBD, THC, CBG, and CBDV in large amounts, but there's been some work relatively recently. I was at the Plant and Animal Genome Conference last year. They do their own like cannabis session now. Actually, there's 2 of them now. And there's been a lot of breeding work to make this THCV chemical a major cannabinoid. So they're actually getting it above 10% now. So I probably should change this slide up a little bit. But this is a way to CBG, or cannabidiolic acid, is kind of like, they think of it, the easy way to think of it is like the stem cell of cannabinoids. It becomes a lot of the other cannabinoids with the action of an enzyme. So THCA synthase makes CBG into THC, CBDA synthase makes CBG into CBD, and CBCA synthase makes CBG into CBC. And those are acid analog forms, and we'll talk about the difference between the acid and neutral forms in a little bit. Ooh, one too many. Okay, so the plant makes these cannabinoids in the form, in the acid form. So THCA is not very intoxicating, so that's why when you have, let's say a joint, for example, and you light that joint and start smoking it, the heat is decarboxylating THCA into THC. So it's turning this non-intoxicating cannabinoid into an intoxicating cannabinoid. Or why, if you were to make brownies back in the day, you'd have to, heat up the THC in the oven, or heat up the flowers in the oven to convert that THCA to THC. Or for some of us who were to do that with like fresh pressed rosin and stuff like that. So that decarboxylation process makes a neutral compound, or neutral cannabinoid. And it's a loss of a carboxyl group. Basically, you can think of it as a CO2 group. It can also happen just naturally through exposure to light or heat or just age of flower material. So the neutral forms of THCV and THC are intoxicating, but their acid analog forms are not. But an interesting and kind of inverse, the opposite is happening with CBD though, because CBDA is actually more bioavailable than CBD. So there's been a trend from a lot of CBD manufacturers to actually start making products with higher amounts of CBDA than CBD. So now, this is word heavy, I apologize. But so, CBD is this non-intoxicating cannabinoid. Its medical benefits are mainly anti-inflammatory, pain relief, anti-anxiety, anti-seizure effects. There's some research that it's good for epilepsy, anxiety, pain, and sleep disorders. CBG was a stem cell cannabinoid that can become other cannabinoids when acted upon by an enzyme. It is largely used for anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and antibacterial properties, but there's some emerging research that shows it's good for glaucoma, inflammatory bowel disease, and certain cancers. CBC is a relatively rare cannabinoid produced from THC or drug candidates in hemp. It doesn't have any, it's not intoxicating, but it also affects that endocannabinoid system. It has very similar properties to CBD and CBG. So it's anti-inflammatory, it's got pain relief properties, but there are also some potential antidepressant effects. And current research is showing that it may be useful for pain management, inflammation, and potentially inhibiting certain tumor growths. CBDV, so it's basically a very similar compound to CBD, but the propyl side chain is shorter. And it's shown it's been shown that it's decent for certain anti-epileptic diseases, so anti-seizure diseases, as well as decreasing nausea and inflammation. CBN is kind of that sleep cannabinoid, non-intoxicating at low amounts, more intoxicating at higher amounts, but it is not as intoxicating as THC. So it's been known to have these sedative effects, so it makes it good for sleep aids. So you see a lot of these hemp sleep sleep tinctures or teas, they traditionally will usually have some amount of CBN. But it also has, some research also shows that it's good for pain and anti-inflammatory properties. And a lot of people's favorite, THC, is the major intoxicating cannabinoid. So the cannabinoid responsible for that high sensation. It's used for anti-pain, anti-nausea, people with muscle spasticity disorders, some food disorders that are like THC. THC is very similar, THCV is very similar to CBDV, which just has this shorter side chain. Also another one that's, they say is non-intoxicating in lower doses and intoxicating in higher doses. It's actually shown potential for managing appetite and weight and acts as an appetite suppressant. So they think that it could be useful for people with diabetes as well as reducing anxiety. And I find that one, it's almost like taking Adderall. It's very, gives you energy and quite interesting. So we've got these cannabis produces like over 100 different cannabinoids. We're just talking about the major ones you can find in the marketplace. But most of these will have different effects, different medicinal benefits. So certain cannabinoids are better at addressing certain things than others. So, you know, if you're looking to aid sleep, THC and CBN are your best bet. If you're looking to relieve pain or inflammation, a lot of these cannabinoids tend to do that. So it's like very specific. If you're looking for relief for a certain ailment, you're going to want to see if the cannabinoid in the product you like is actually doing that for you. Cool. So we're going to talk about common cannabinoid dosages. So the CBD, a lot of the CBD products on the market are actually just kind of like snake oil. They don't really have enough CBD in them to be effective for what people usually want to use it for. Like Epidiolex, which is the approved, FDA-approved medication that's based on CBD, which basically is a CBD extract. It's about a milligram per kilogram or more. So, yeah, usually the bioactive, or the amount that you should be taking of CBD is about 5 to 15 milligrams per kilogram. For CBDV, it's about 5 to 10. For CBC, it's about around 4. CBG, about 5 to 10. The CBN, this is not a milligram per kilogram, so be very careful. They basically say about 5 milligrams of CBN is like taking one sleeping pill. So you don't want to think about that in terms of milligrams per kilogram, but basically you want to be in the range of about 5 to 10. Higher dosages tend to result in grogginess when you wake up. THC, THCO, and THCV, you want to be kind of in the range of 5 to 100. But if you're a beginner, of course, you want to start more, probably in the 2.5 to 5, and work your way up to 10. People with higher tolerances. My boss at work, we were working, and he took 300 milligrams. So it's like very specific to the person, and as well as their experience with cannabis. So here's some commonly used cannabinoid sources to make products. You've got your traditional flower. This can be extracted through many different means. You've got hydrocarbons, CO2, heat and pressure, and ethanol. And what that'll do is this will make what we would consider a crude extract. So it's basically like we'll call it a holistic plant extract. It's got plant fats and waxes. It's got terpenes in it, cannabinoids. So it's kind of like the essence, the very raw essence of the plant. In our industry, we do a process called winterization. Winterization is the removal of these fats and waxes from an oil. And that's basically done by dissolving your crude extract in ethanol, getting it very cold, and then filtering out the fats and waxes because those will precipitate together and make it very easy to filter it out using a funnel or other filtering means. So then you kind of have this opaque looking oil that becomes much clearer oil. So we would just call that winterized crude. So it's just kind of like still largely a plant extract or a plant essence, but a lot of the fats and waxes and other things you don't want in there that will really filter it out. And then you take this winterized crude and you distill it using, there's many different ways. Most people use like a short bath. But you basically distill out a lot of the other, I guess, unwanted compounds that are still in this extract. And then we're going to talk about later what the different applications for most of these are. Because crude extract and winterized crude, they're good because they have a lot of these acid analog chemicals, but they do impart a lot of flavor because there's other things other than cannabinoids in them. So like when we get to distillate, we've distilled out a lot of the terpenes, not all of them, but a good amount of them. We've distilled out most of the chlorophyll and the pigments. So it tends to look like this pretty gold oil or liquid. If we wanted to create an isolate, so let's say we were a CBD farmer, we want to make tinctures, and we want it just to be CBD by itself. You basically dissolve this in a hydrocarbon. Most people use pentane. You cool it down, then you precipitate the CBD out of it, and then grind those crystals into an isolate. You can use this isolate or distillate to make what people use in beverages and like seasoning mixes or teas. This is water-soluble cannabinoid product. So basically using like high shear mixers or ultrasonic sound waves to break the CBD particles or THC particles or other cannabinoids into really, really small particles. And you can make these in both you basically would make a liquid water soluble first using like that emulsifier or an ultrasonic sound wave. It makes a liquid, which is the picture on the right. That's using a high pressure emulsifier. Then you use a spray dryer to spray to basically create a powdered version of the liquid. And then the benefit of these water soluble cannabinoids is that we'll talk about it later, but they're more bioavailable and they act faster. So yeah, we talked about these forms of cannabinoid concentrates. You've got your crude, it's got cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and other compounds. It always really has a strong flavor, and when we say very consistency, it really depends on the input material. Can kind of determine if you have a 5% biomass versus 13% CBD biomass. Your percent CBD, you're fine with crude extract, can vary significantly. So the winterized crude is basically this crude that's removed the waxes, lipids, and chlorophyll. Rosin, which I didn't show in the last one, it's like a solvent-free extraction method, and it preserves a lot of these terpenes and flavonoid compounds. It's more popular in adult use markets because it produces, when you extract hemp, the amount of THC in your extract goes above legally compliant amounts. So that's why you don't see like CBD rosin on the marketplace. But there are companies like Minnesota Salt and others for now who make gummies out of rosin. So you can use rosin in like finished products, you just can't sell it as it's like raw form. But that's largely what people want for it tends to be a lot tastier than those extraction methods because it preserves those terpenes. Distillate, so you've got high concentrations of cannabinoids in an oil. They can be used to make a variety of products. Traditionally, most of your products were probably made this way a decade ago. And these isolates and water-soluble powders and liquids are more on the newer side of things. So an isolate is this highly purified form of a single cannabinoid. So it's like 99.9, 99.8% CBD, CBG, CBC. So it does not have any other cannabinoids, terpenes, or flavonoids. And you've got this water soluble, which can be powder or liquid. And it's just cannabinoids that are broken down into very small particle size, often into the nanoscale. And that allows them to more easily mix with water-based substances. But saying that they're water soluble and being a scientist is not exactly true. It's really like largely an invisible effect. You've got oil droplets that appear to be dissolving in water, but they're not really. It's just kind of in suspension. But it's good to market as it's water soluble. So we talked about these things that are called terpenes. So like terpenes are these hydrocarbon compounds that give smells to fruits and flowers. They tend to be very abundant in reproductive structures such as flowers, immediately or following flowering. So these terpenes are what give most of the smell of your favorite cannabis strains. They're smelling. So if you like the smell of blue dreams or you like the smell of orange cookies, these are largely produced by the terpene composition of those cultivars. So in this marketplace, we've got these cannabis-derived terpenes, and you've got botanical terpenes. So cannabis-derived terpenes are, like it says, terpenes that are derived from cannabis. They're basically cannabis essential oils. So like if you ever use an essential oil diffuser, used like lavender or mint, those are terpenes that are being diffused into the air. So it's ideal for flavoring products that you want to smell and taste like cannabis. I think that the larger market space really doesn't want that. But I think that for very niche and very, we call it heady in our industry, heady products will have the tendency to be made with, cannabis structure. You're trying to match the flavor of that cultivar of cannabis. Whereas there's botanical terpenes on the market, and they are basically attempts at recreating a cannabis terpene profile, but using terpenes, so they'll use limonene from oranges or lemons, they'll use pinene from pine needles. So they're basically terpenes that are taken from plants that produce them in better abundances, and so they tend to be cheaper. They tend to try to mimic the cannabis plant's natural flavors and aromas, but most often they don't do that very well. It's kind of in the ballpark of what cannabis should smell and taste like sometimes, but it's just kind of like a background most of the time. So there's this entourage effect. So cannabinoids tend to be more impactful or more useful or more effective in the presence of other cannabinoids and other terpenes. So like when we talked about that CBN likes to be this 3-to-1 ratio with THC and CBD. So if there's 3 parts CBD to 1 part CBN, it is more effective at producing sleep. That's very true for most of these cannabinoids. So like this endocannabinoid system that's in our brain is acted upon mainly by the cannabinoids, but it's also modulated by these terpenes. So these terpenes can either, improve the effect of these cannabinoids or increase it. So those are common formulated products on the marketplace. We've got chocolates, candies, drinks, gummies, mints. In the drinks, you've got, aqua frescas, seltzers, sodas, salves, lotions, balms, butters, bath bombs, vapes and cartridges, tinctures, pills, gel capsules. We make, for Holistic, we make some bacon flavored gummies for dogs. So there's like a pretty wide marketplace in products that you can make that incorporate cannabinoids and terpenes. So lab testing is very important in the work we do, so that we know we're making a quality product that's consistent. So you can get these lab tests that will will give you data about your cannabinoid potency, terpene potency, heavy metals, pesticides, microbials, mycotoxins, and residual solvents. So here's like a lab result for bubblegum breath flower. There was 15.75% total cannabinoids. This is a very unique cultivar because it has both CBD, CBDV, and a little bit of CBC, THCV, and THC. So this would be kind of like a plant you'd want to smoke if you're trying to go for the entourage effect. So we're going to talk about like, how do you, let's say you wanted to test, you wanted to make some products at home and you wanted to test them. There's a company called SC Labs you can ship the sample to in Colorado. It's, I want to say it's $70 or $75. But basically, you read the sample. So this is a sample of hemp-derived THC distillate. We can see that there are some other cannabinoids in there like CBD, CBG, but predominantly, 85.42% of that oil is THC. And if you're going to formulate a product out of it, you don't really need the percent, you need how many milligrams per gram there are of the cannabinoid that you want to incorporate. So 85.42% is basically 854.2 milligrams per gram. So a gram is 1,000 milligrams. So let's say Minnesota's products have a cap, if they're edibles, at 50 milligrams. So we want 50 milligrams. We're going to divide that by our total milligrams per gram, 854.2, and that would give us 0.0585 grams of that distillate that would end up in your product. So it's actually a really small amount ends up in your pretzels or gummies and in the entire package. So it's kind of funny, the amount of price increase, because we're talking like 3 to 7 cents depending on the source of this distillate going in every bag. So they can turn a bag of gummies, which would be like a couple dollars, into 20 to 30 dollars, just by the addition of a couple pennies of distillate. But now let's just say we wanted to make a 25 unit batch of gummies or pretzels. We would take this 25 and multiply it by the, we've got 50 milligrams. In 50 milligrams of this distillate is 0.0585 grams, and we would end up with 1.46 grams of distillate per batch. But now let's say we wanted to make a CBDVA salve. We have this crude, winterized crude extract. We're gonna find our CBDVA. And it's 13.15%, which means 131.5 milligrams per gram are in that oil. We can take 1,000 divided by 131.5, which would be about 7.6 grams, multiplied by 25 if you wanted to make 25 salves or lotions or body odors, and that would be 190.11 grams of this winterized crude we need per batch. So some product supplements that are starting to become popular in the marketplace. We're seeing a lot more herbs and mushrooms used in beverages and gummies, and so these things also have different medicinal compounds that give different medicinal benefits. So it's kind of cool seeing this market evolve into creating more like, it's almost, I try to think of it more as supplements. They're putting together different compounds that'll help people treat certain things that they may be suffering from. Running out of time. So we kind of talked about, oils versus more water soluble or liquid soluble nanoemulsions. So typical carrier oils, I would say probably like 85 or more percent of market species is MCT. It's called medium chain triglyceride oil. It's like they take coconut oil and like use pressure and separate the solid from liquid fats. And the liquid fats are MCT oil. You can see products made of hemp oil, sunflower, avocado, grapeseed, etc. Your standard oil droplet is relatively large. And then when you start using these emulsifiers or sonic, basically using high wave sound, you can start breaking these oil droplets into smaller and smaller sizes. So these microemulsions or nanoemulsions are more bioavailable. And for THC, it actually increases and speeds up the onset time. So traditionally, you're waiting like 20 to 45 minutes, depending on the person, to feel the effects of an edible. And that time, if the particle size is small enough, that time would be down to about 7 to 15 minutes. So there's some benefits for using these water-soluble liquids and powders. So yeah, so these traditional oils, so dissolve your distillate into a carrier oil. There's a larger particle size. It's slower to absorb. A lot of it gets removed by your liver. But these water-soluble or nano-emulsified particles have a smaller size. They're more bioavailable. They reach the bloodstream quicker, and they are faster to absorb. So like all seltzers are made with these water-soluble nanoemulsions. And that's usually why you'll feel a seltzer hit you faster than you would, let's say, a gummy or a tincture. So we're going to do some more math. We'll probably have to speed through this for a running out of time. But let's say we wanted to make a tincture. And let's just look at the CBD one on the right over here, so it's bigger. We've got an isolate of CBD, it's 99.4%. CBD, so that's 994 milligrams per gram. We want to make a tincture that will actually work for us. So we're looking at like a 5,000 milligram tincture. We're going to divide it by the milligrams per gram of our isolate. So each tincture will have about 5 grams in it, and like a 5 milligrams. You're going to want your milligrams needed per unit. You're going to divide that by the milligrams per gram of your concentrate or isolate, and that'll end up giving you your grams of concentrate per unit. So if we wanted to like create this into like an edible formulation calculator, you know, our input variables are the total cannabinoid content of your concentrate, so that's the milligrams per gram of concentrate, the number of things you want to make, edibles, tinctures, salves, and the desired cannabinoid dosage per edible. It's best to convert this into milligrams for future math. And then you're going to have to convert your edible ingredients also to grams. It just makes it a lot easier to work with. And then you're going to have these separate calculation steps. So you're going to calculate the total number of cannabinoid needed for the batch. You want to determine the amount of cannabinoid extract needed based on its concentration. So you'll calculate the weight of the cannabinoid extract needed based on its potency. So this is going to be in milligrams per gram. So you got milligrams needed per edible divided by the milligrams per gram of concentrate, and you'll times that by the number of edibles or tinctures or salves that you want to make per batch. You're going to want to determine the weight of all of your other ingredients needed for the recipe. So you've got the weight in grams of an ingredient per edible times the number of edibles equals the amount of ingredient per batch. You'll add the weight in grams of each individual ingredient per edible times the number of edibles, and that will equal the total weight of ingredients per batch. And so we'll do, this is kind of like an actual example of this. So let's say we wanted to make some 50 milligram THC edible elderberry syrups. So we'll take 50 milligrams per elderberry syrup. It's going to be divided by, our water-soluble THC, which is 150 milligrams per gram. So that ends up being 0.33 grams of water-soluble THC. We want to make 30 elderberry syrups, we'll multiply it by 30, and that'll end up giving us, we need 10 grams of water-soluble THC. But our weight of our final product per elderberry syrup, let's say that it's 50 grams, since 0.33% or 0.33 grams of this syrup is our water-soluble THC. We're gonna subtract that 0.33 by 50 grams. So then we need 49.67 grams of this elderberry syrup. And let's say we're making 30 syrups per batch. We'll multiply that number we just came up with, 49.66 by 30, and that'll we'll end up needing, 1,490 grams of elderberry syrup. I don't know why we don't use the metric system, but the metric system is awesome. But yeah, so you want to convert your concentrates as well as your ingredients into grams, and it just makes math so much easier. Yeah, we'll do this kind of like another example. So we want to make some THC honeys. We want to make 20 honeys. The total honey weight is 50 grams per jar. We're using a THC distillate. That's 854.2 milligrams per gram. So we've identified we want to make them a strength of 50 milligrams. We want to make 20 jars. So we'll need 1,000 milligrams. But you're like, 1,000 milligrams is a gram, so maybe I just want to use a gram of distillate. But distillate isn't pure THC. It's only 85% pure. So we're going to take our 1,000 milligrams divided by 854.2, and we'll need 1.17 grams of THC distillate to make a product that's reliable and tests at the way that we want it to. As we said before, a traditional carrier oil is MCT, and traditionally most people will do about a 1-to-1 amount. So you've got your 1.17 grams of THC distillate and 1.17 grams of MCT oil. Since we're making 50-gram jars, and we made 20 honeys, that's 1,000 grams of total weight. And then we have 2.34 grams of this weight are THC and MCT, so we have to subtract that by the total weight we want, and that'll be the amount of honey we need to make this batch of 20 honey jars. This is basically doing the same thing as I did in the past two slides, so I'm basically running out of time, so I want to open it up for questions. So we got one right here.
Hi, I'm Christopher Ray, so I have a hearing loss and both the speech impediment doesn't bother me, as long as you can understand me, I'm fine. I'm a medical device engineer, but I see you have a fair amount of calculations, which doesn't bother me, but maybe some of the public it might be a little complicated. So are your slides available for download?
Well, I would say contact, Big Psych, and they'll make them available. Okay. They have them, so I'll tell them to make them available.
I have a second question. So I became interested back in the 80s. There was a story about an epileptic kid, and his parents did research and found this compound called, or solution called Lorenzo oil, which happened to be THC derived, I believe. Anyway, the compound was used to treat his epilepsy, and he had tremendous results. But then the government and the FDA stepped in and said, no, you can't make this because, back at that time we didn't have state regulation of weed, we call it. And anyway, they went through the courts, and I don't know how they ended So what I'm trying to follow up is, I come from Detroit. So in Michigan, weed is medicinally and recreationally approved, and now in Minnesota. The dispensaries there are now selling products as high as, I actually seen it, not that I used it, but I know friends that have 50% THC, so which is kind of mind-blowing.
For flower?
No, this was actually a rolled joint that she got in a jar from a dispensary.
That's a lot.
Wow.
If you smoke that whole joint, yeah, that's 500 milligrams of THC.
Right.
I think for most people, that's quite a hefty dose.
Anyway, one more question. So, I was at a bar in Coon Rapids lately, and they were selling THC beer, or was it seltzer? I can't remember anyway.
Yeah, probably seltzer or soda, because the law doesn't allow it in alcohol products.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so I asked the bartender, I said, you know, how this equivalent to a joint? She didn't know. And so I said, well, I'm an engineer, I can calculate this, right? So I went online, found the formula, and so come to like a 3 to 5% THC seltzer would be like a fraction of a whole joint.
So it gets a little bit more complex than that, because so when you ingest THC, it's acted upon by the liver, and then your liver converts it into a compound known as hydroxy THC, which is significantly more intoxicating than regular THC. That's why a lot of people, like if you think about it in terms of like, I smoked this 17% joint, there should be 170 milligrams in there. Why does this edible with 10 milligrams put me on the couch? It's because your body's actually converting it into a whole different compound that's more psychoactive. That's why a lot of people have trouble gauging how many milligrams they need to consume. So like most people should start small and then work their way up when they're thinking about taking edible products. As well as the seltzer thing is nice because they're more rapid onset time, allows you to feel the effect sooner, so you'll know faster if you want to have another seltzer or soda. Do we have any more questions?
Sorry. Just a follow-up question, I'll be short, I promise. As far as labeling concerned, because, coming from the medically regulated industries like the medical devices, we have to list everything on the label. So as far as the average consumer is concerned about labeling products to common knowledge understanding. You see where I'm going at here? Does that make sense?
I don't exactly. Are you talking about like cannabinoids or like, what are you talking about? So
consider your seltzer, right?
Yep.
Most consumers wouldn't understand the equivalency to say a joint.
Yep.
So that's what I'm talking about.
So even the seltzer thing becomes a little bit more complex because the recent law changed allowed, so before you could have, if you had individual divider lines on a can, you could have 50 milligrams of THC in each can. Now the law has changed that into you can only have 10 maximum. So most beverages you find in the marketplace are either 5 or 10s. I would personally, for the average person that is uninitiated with cannabis use, 5 is probably pretty good. I think a lot of older people, there's some 2.5 milligram gummies that we see people like who don't who haven't often used cannabis or haven't in a while. So I would say it's still very bodily dependent. Some people their liver processes it into hydroxy THC more effectively than others. You've got completely different brain chemistries from individual to individual. So I think it's like cannabis is more of a medicine that you need to dial in for yourself and not necessarily compare yourself to someone else. But yeah, they're calling me for time. So if you want to find me, I'll be wandering around. We can talk. Thank you.
Everyone give it up for Dr. Dabs.